For decades, Hanks has been called America's dad, the kind-hearted everyman who can make us laugh, cry, and believe in decency again. Behind the curtain of fame, Tom Hanks's real story is not one of effortless success. In this video, we're not just going to retell his career highlights. Instead, we'll look deeper into the struggles that define the man behind the camera. Adulthood did not arrive as a rescue for Tom Hanks. If anything, it brought a new kind of loneliness. In 1977, at just 21 years old, he left behind Sacramento State University, carrying little more than a battered suitcase, an old typewriter, and the fragile hope that he could survive in New York City. He lived like countless young dreamers do, sharing cramped apartments with near strangers, sometimes crashing on floors, sometimes on sagging couches. Casting calls became his lifeline. He went to audition after audition, walking into rooms full of people who barely looked up from their clipboards. But rejection didn't break him. It carved him. Every no forced him to dig deeper, to sharpen his craft, and to refuse invisibility. He took every opportunity. No matter how small or humiliating, he did bit parts in off-Broadway plays. He took stagehand jobs at the Great Lakes Theater Festival in Cleveland, not only acting, but also building sets, hanging lights, and sweeping floors. He even starred in a low-budget horror movie, He Knows You're Alone, 1980, which critics quickly forgot, but which gave him just enough to pay rent. Those years taught him something invaluable: show up, work hard, and keep going, even if no one notices. By 1980, at the age of 24, Hanks finally landed a breakthrough of sorts. He was cast in the quirky sitcom Bosom Buddies. The series was short-lived, but it gave him exposure, some income, and a chance to show Hollywood he had something more than just a funny voice. By the mid-1980s, Hanks transitioned from small TV roles to films. Movies like Splash, 1984, and Big, 1988, began to show Hollywood that this unassuming actor had something rare: the ability to blend humor with vulnerability. He wasn't the conventional leading man. He wasn't muscular, brooding, or brash, but he was relatable. When he cried, audiences cried with him. When he laughed, it felt genuine, not forced. He became the kind of actor who made you feel less alone, not more dazzled. And that authenticity, forged in the loneliness of childhood and the struggles of early adulthood, began to set him apart to the outside world. Tom Hanks's rise in the late 1980s and 1990s looked effortless. After early comedic success in Big in 1988, audiences embraced him not just as an actor, but as someone who felt familiar, like a neighbor, a friend, a brother. Ake, Philadelphia, 1993. For example, a groundbreaking film about AIDS and social stigma. To play the role, Hanks shed nearly 35 pounds. That transformation was not just physical. He had to embody the weight of living under constant judgment. When filming wrapped, the role didn't leave him easily. He carried the character's emotional gravity long after the camera stopped rolling. The following year, Forrest Gump, 1994, cemented his legacy. It's almost impossible now to imagine anyone else in the role. The film became a cultural touchstone, earning over $650 million globally. But what the public didn't see was the personal risk Hanks took. Instead of accepting a guaranteed $7 million salary, he gambled on a share of the profits. That decision, both bold and frightening, paid off enormously, reportedly netting him more than $70 million. Yet with the money came pressure. Success became less about achievement and more about expectation. In Saving Private Ryan, 1998, he portrayed Captain Miller with a restraint that conveyed not just the horror of war, but the moral weight of leadership. Then came Castaway, 2000, a role that pushed both his physical endurance and his emotional resilience to the limit. Production was split into two parts. Before and after his character's drastic weight loss, Hanks had to shed more than 50 pounds, growing his hair and beard to embody isolation. For months, he lived in near silence on set, simulating the crushing loneliness of a man stranded without hope. Even when filming ended, the echoes of solitude stayed with him. He later admitted that it took time to shake off the emptiness of that experience. Even as his career soared, Hanks held himself to punishing standards. He admitted later that only a few of his many films ever felt complete to him for us watching. Hanks seemed to have it all: money, fame, respect, influence. But inside, he still wrestled with loneliness, perfectionism, and the constant fear of slipping into irrelevance. And this isn't just about Tom Hanks. His experience mirrors the human truth that achievements, no matter how great, rarely erase our insecurities. Hanks's life shows that even the loftiest goals, Oscars, box office records, worldwide fame, cannot heal the deepest wounds. Behind the applause and trophies, Tom Hanks's personal life carried storms as dramatic as any Hollywood script. For a man celebrated as a symbol of family values on screen, his real-life journey through love and marriage was far more complicated, marked by heartbreak, guilt, and eventually, resilience forged in illness. His first marriage to actress Samantha Lewis began when he was only 21. It was not a union born of maturity, but of loneliness and fear. Hanks admitted later that he mistook desperation for readiness, believing that a wife and children could heal the wounds of his own fractured childhood. Soon after, he became a young husband and father to Colin and Elizabeth. By 1987, the marriage ended in divorce. For Hanks, the separation was devastating, not only as a husband, but as a son who had once vowed never to repeat his parents' mistakes. Watching his children grow up between two households mirrored his own painful past, and he carried that guilt for years. He later confessed that some of his deepest regrets were missing bedtimes, school plays, and the quiet moments that build trust between parent and child. The public saw him as America's dad, but in private he feared he had failed his own children. Tragedy added another layer years later when Samantha was diagnosed with bone cancer. Though no longer married, Hanks quietly stepped back into her life, covering medical costs, visiting her often, sitting by her bed. When she passed in 2002, he carried the sorrow quietly, never turning it into spectacle. Their marriage became one of Hollywood's rare steady lights, a bond that endured decades when so many others crumbled. But the test of their love came not in red carpet moments, but in hospital rooms. In 2015, Rita was diagnosed with breast cancer. For Hanks, it was as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. The woman who had steadied him for decades now faced a battle that no fame or fortune could soften. Rita underwent a double mastectomy and reconstructive surgery. The process was grueling, painful, slow, and filled with uncertainty. Tom stood beside her through every step, whispering encouragement, holding her hand, and breaking down in private when the fear of losing her felt unbearable. In interviews, he admitted that Rita had saved his life many times through love and support. Now, his only mission was to stay at her side and pray he wouldn't have to face a world without her. In 2020, while Hanks was in Australia filming, both he and Rita tested positive for COVID-19. At the time, they were among the first global celebrities to announce their diagnosis, instantly making headlines. For most people, COVID was frightening enough. For Hanks, then 63 and living with type 2 diabetes, it was potentially life-threatening. The illness hit Rita hard: exhaustion, fever, loss of taste and smell. For Tom, the risk was sobering. He confessed later that during those uncertain days, he even drafted quiet farewell letters, just in case. Hanks journaled, sent messages of reassurance to fans, and tried to coax smiles from Rita when she could barely sit up. They recovered. But the experience left its mark. Tom admitted that his body no longer bounced back as it once had. Fatigue lingered, joints ached, and his diabetes management grew more demanding. And yet, instead of bitterness, he found perspective. This resilience, built through illness and loss, is what makes Hanks and Wilson's bond extraordinary. It wasn't about grand romantic gestures. It was about devotion in the darkest hours, the kind of love that stays when everything else falls apart. Even as Tom Hanks entered the later stages of his career, life didn't let him coast on reputation alone. Beyond the spotlight, he faced battles more personal and painful than any role could script. One of the deepest wounds came through his son, Chet. While Colin built a respected career of his own, Chet spiraled into addiction, public outbursts, and controversies that dragged the Hanks family into unwanted headlines. Then came his own health. In 2013, Tom revealed he had type 2 diabetes, a condition that demands constant vigilance. For the man who once starved himself for Philadelphia and cast away, it was a cruel irony that now even his diet, sleep, and daily habits could determine his well-being. COVID-19 in 2020 only sharpened the risk. Though he recovered, the illness left him fatigued, slower, more aware of his own fragility. Time, once his ally, had become something he had to negotiate with. Yet if hardship marked these years, so did resilience. Financially, Hanks reached extraordinary heights, with a net worth estimated at $400 million. But wealth was never his real legacy. He and Rita gave generously to cancer research, homelessness relief, arts education, and hospitals. His philanthropy was never flashy. It was steady, like the man himself. These days, Hanks lives with quiet dignity. His home in Pacific Palisades offers comfort, but it's his Greek retreat on Antipros that symbolizes his present for audiences. Tom Hanks will always be Forrest Gump, Captain Miller, or Chuck Noland, but for those who look closer, he is proof that kindness, carried consistently through the storms of life, is its own kind of triumph. When people think of Tom Hanks, they often picture the characters who defined him. Forrest running across America, Chuck Noland talking to a volleyball on a deserted island, or Captain Miller leading his men through the chaos of war. But the deeper truth is that his greatest role was never on screen. It has been in the way he carried life itself, with steadiness, humility, and the courage to keep showing up even when it hurt. From a fractured childhood to rejection in New York, from divorce to illness, from the public struggles of his son to his own health battles, Hanks has lived through storms that could have hardened him. Yet instead of bitterness, he chose empathy. Instead of hiding behind fame, he leaned into kindness as a discipline. That's what makes his story resonate so deeply. It isn't about perfection, but persistence in many ways. Tom Hanks embodies a lesson for all of us. Life will never promise stability. Families fracture, dreams falter, and even the strongest bodies eventually weaken. What defines us is not how much applause we collect, but how we respond in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Hanks reminds us that greatness is less about achievement and more about character, a habit practiced day after day, often unseen. Today, in his late 60s, he enjoys a quieter rhythm, he chooses meaningful projects, invests in philanthropy, and spends summers on a Greek island with Rita Wilson, the partner who has walked through fire with him. Yet even in this serenity, he does not pretend that life is free from scars. He carries them openly, not as weights, but as reminders of survival. For audiences, that honesty is perhaps his final gift. We don't just see a Hollywood icon, we see a human being who struggled, failed, loved, endured, and still believes in the power of kindness. And in a world that often feels fractured and cynical, that example may be more powerful than any film role. So as we close this story, here's the takeaway. Tom Hanks shows us that peace is not a prize waiting at the end of success. It's a practice, a daily choice to be kind, to endure, to love, and to keep going even when life is unsteady. His story isn't just about Hollywood, it's about all of us, trying to make meaning out of scars and turning pain into compassion. Now it's your turn. Has Tom Hanks ever inspired you? In a film, a line, or even a quiet interview? Did his work ever find you in a difficult moment? Share your story in the comments below. And if his life reminds you that goodness is still possible, tap the like button as a small tribute, because sometimes the greatest way to honor someone who lived with kindness is to carry a little more of it ourselves.